Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasinubhyeva patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're going to continue from the Nectar of Instruction, text number 5. Let me just read the verse again. Krishneti yasya giritam manasadriyeta dikshasti chat pranitibis chanitibis chavajnam isham Shushu Shaya Chavajanam Ananya Anya Dindati Sunyridayam Itsikta Sangulabhya. One should mentally honor the devotee who chants the holy name of the Lord Krishna. One should offer humble obeisances to the devotee who has undergone spiritual initiation, Diksha, and is engaged in worshipping the deity. And one should associate with and faithfully serve that pure devotee who is advanced in undeviated devotional service and whose heart is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. So Prabhupada has given us many different points of view on these 3 different levels of devotees. From the internal view, for instance, for the Madhyama Adhikari, he has a vision. The Kanishta Adhikari doesn't really have very much of a vision. He has some vision. He sees the deity and he recognizes that he should serve the deity and he should serve the spiritual master. But he doesn't have much of a vision beyond that. Second class devotee, he sees God as an object of worship, not just service, but also worship to develop prema, unalloyed worship, unalloyed service. And he sees the other devotees and reciprocates with them according to their level of advancement. As Sri Rupa Goswami's advice here, that we have to have intelligence enough so we can see on what level the devotees are at so we can adequately exchange loving service with them. And the first class devotee, he sees everyone as an object of service and love. He sees everyone equally as good as Bhagavan, as Krishna. Therefore his love is not limited or restricted, it's unrestricted and unlimited. Just like Gorakishore Das Babaji, he was taking prasadam and one dog next to him, or near where he lived, had little puppies. So all the little puppies would come and eat from his plate while he was eating prasadam. And his servant tried to restrain them, but he said, no, they're residents of Vrindavan, of Mayapur actually at that time. How can you forbid them from taking prasadam? Or sometimes little boys would throw rocks at Gorakishore Das Babaji, and Gorakishore Das Babaji was thinking that these little boys are actually cowherd boyfriends of Krishna, and they're having some pastime with me by throwing rocks at me. Probably it's not a good idea to imitate such a Mahabhagavat. For instance, another Mahabhagavat was Morari Chaitanya Das, the disciple of Taranga Thakur, Sharanga Thakur. Sharanga Thakur was Mahabhagavat, but he never accepted any disciple. But the super soul in his heart kept on urging him to accept someone as your disciple. But Taranga Thakur was very reluctant. But one day he decided, all right, the first person I meet, I'm going to accept as my disciple. He was swimming in the Ganges, and a dead body floated past, and he touched with his foot the dead body, and he came to life and became a great devotee. His name was Murari Chaitanya Das, who was formerly, he was a young boy, and he had been bitten by a snake and died, and his parents put him into the Ganges, and he was floating past the Ranga Thakur, and he had become Murari Chaitanya Das. Murari Chaitanya Das became such a great devotee that it is said that he'd go into the jungle, and when he'd see tigers, he'd slap them across the face while he was chanting Hare Krishna. So if you want to judge your level of advancement, just find some jungle with tigers in it, slap them across the face and see how they respond. If they start chanting Hare Krishna, that's a very good sign. Otherwise, well, you'll have another chance in your next lifetime. Or he used to put venomous snakes on his lap and play with them. Probably easier to acquire a few venomous snakes and play around with them. Or even more practical for us, when he would sit underneath the water for 3 days and chant Hare Krishna. So if you're behind in your rounds and you want to catch up, no one will disturb you, just go in the water for 3 days and chant Hare Krishna. But of course these things cannot be imitated. They're way beyond a normal person's ability. On the other hand, Madhyama Adhikari, we can see how they should have, for instance, for the Adhikar of Uttama Adhikari for eligibility for devotional service, they have conclusive knowledge of the Shastra. But a Madhyama Adhikari, even there is said, he knows Shastra, but sometimes he cannot always come up with the right Siddhanta. So that's Madhyam. He sees, yes, there is God, there is the devotees, I have to reciprocate with them accordingly. There's the innocent, I have to try to help them become Krishna conscious, I should preach to them in some way. And then there's the envious, I should try to avoid them. But sometimes when confronted with opposing arguments, he cannot always refer exactly to the right Shastra. Although he has firm faith in the objective, and it's not that the Madhyama Adhikari doesn't know Shastra. Obviously he knows Shastra, because otherwise how he can discriminate in that way. But his conclusive knowledge of the Shastra is not always evident if he gets into an argument with someone. For instance, debating with the Mayavadis, an Uttama Adhikari devotee will always defeat the Mayavadis. But a Madhyama Adhikari may become sometimes bewildered by the Sanskrit or something. He may not always have exactly the right reply. But he's unshaken in his faith that Krishna is the goal. On the other hand, Kanisa Adhikari, neither is he always clear on the goal. Sometimes he gets bewildered by bad association. He gets attracted to developing some material opulence like wealth or material education or becoming popular. He sometimes becomes bewildered by those things. And sometimes he doesn't have the right Shastric evidence. He may be able to quote Shastra, someone may memorize the entire Vedic literature and quote Shastra, but it may be the wrong thing he's saying, because he doesn't really have faith in the goal. In the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna says, Adyas Chashradanascha Samshayatma Vinashati Nanyam Lokastina Paro Nasukam Samshayatmanaha. But faithless persons who doubt the revealed scripture go to ruin and perish. For the doubting soul there is happiness neither in this world or in the next. And Prabhupada writes in the purport that there are many people, they have no faith at all in the scripture. And others, they say they have faith in the scripture, but they don't have any faith in Krishna. And others say they have faith in Krishna, but they have no faith in devotional service to Krishna. He said the first class who doubt everything, they're definitely going to go ruin and perish. There's no yakshatra vidim ustrija vartate kamakarta asa sudim avatnoti nasukam na parangati. Those who doubt the revealed scriptures and act whimsically according to whatever whim comes up in their mind can have neither peace or perfection nor the supreme destination. Now, of course, that doesn't mean if someone can't get what we consider to be material opulence. For instance, one may be completely atheistic, he may be a great materialistic scientist, he may have great material opulence, but he cannot be happy. Why do we say, here's a person, he's so wealthy, he has so much opulence, he has so much material education, he has so many followers, but he's not happy? Because anyone who identifies himself with his body and is worried about dying, how can he be happy? If you have millions and trillions of dollars and, well, say I was going to give you $1 billion trillion. It's not worth very much nowadays, the devaluation of the dollar. But anyhow, you could probably buy your next meal, we hope. But if I only gave it to you for 1/1000th of a second, what good would it do for you? So compared to time eternal, what is 100 years in eternal time? It's less than 100 billionth of a second relative to our own life right now. Billion years is nothing. For 411 trillion, 40 billion years, Prabhupada writes, is just a flash in cosmic space, in cosmic time. That's life of Brahma. So now I have so much opulence, but if I'm just about to die, what good will it do for me? It won't do me very much good. On the other hand, if I'm in ecstasy chanting Hare Krishna, and I'm personally experiencing directly Krishna, and if not participating, at least perceiving directly with my spiritual senses his loving pastimes on the spiritual platform, then one will be magnichitak. One's consciousness will be so full with happiness, one will not desire anything else. Therefore, one should try to develop knowledge based on scripture, try to cultivate knowledge and apply that within one's life. Now, knowledge according to scripture doesn't mean some dry philosophy where one is able to defeat academically some other person. It actually means how to develop these 6 loving exchanges appropriately. Therefore, generally the devotees aren't interested in arguments and different types of mental speculation. They're more interested in loving service. But if necessary, to help people come to the spiritual platform, sometimes even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he would engage in debates with persons like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya or someone like Prakashananda Saraswati. But we can see he just gave conclusive arguments from the Shastra. And somehow or another, these people were intelligent enough, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, when Krishna says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told him that the Lord is everywhere. He has his eyes and faces and his arms everywhere. How can you say that he's impersonal? Sarvata Panipadam Tat, Sarvata Shri Shiro Mukam, Sarvata Shrutimaloke, Sarma Vritishtati. How can you tell me that he's impersonal? The Vedas say he has his arms and legs and eyes everywhere. He has his form everywhere. How can he be impersonal? In any case, by developing knowledge about Krishna consciousness, and more importantly, developing our ability to engage in these 6 loving exchanges, then one goes from a Kanisa Adhikari to a Madhyama Adhikari, and ultimately an Uttama Adhikari, where one is expanding his love to all of the entities. Now, of course, if we don't preach, if we only stay in the temple, and we think, well, these poor people out there, if they get some fortune, Krishna will come and tell them to come to the temple. If not, why should I bother? Or these people, they look horrible, no one could possibly convert them because they're all demons. No, the devotees, second-class platform, we practice and by practicing, trying to serve the predecessor acharyas by preaching, then the result is that gradually we'll develop an ability to see how they're also Krishna's eternal servants. If you go out there, for instance, on book distribution, and by saying a few words which obviously come from Krishna, are empowered by Krishna, suddenly the person decides to take a book and becomes enlivened just by your association. Could be, excuse me, sir, where are you from? I say, I'm from here. Wow, this is a wonderful place. Everyone here is so nice, and the person feels better. And then you say, what kind of work do you do? Wow, that's a wonderful occupation. Are you a good, dentist? And you say, yes, I'm a good dentist. And you just get them very positive, and they say, would you like a book? And the person's ecstatic already. You say, sure, why not? Just the ability to enliven people to take a book, that intelligence and that transcendental potency Krishna gives, and then one can actually see that people are not as we imagine them to be. They're actually something different, and eventually one can realize they're actually all Krishna's servants, including myself. Therefore, preaching has to be there to the innocent. Otherwise, how can we go from thinking these people are their bodies and looking at everyone according to their designation, male, female, black, white, rich, poor, intelligent, foolish, and how are we going to go to loving everyone? It has to be some intermediate stage. And that intermediate stage is try to deliver Krishna to others through, somehow or another, through spreading Krishna consciousness, chanting the holy name, giving some prasadam, giving them Prabhupada's books. It's not just an intellectual exercise or based upon business skill. Basically, it's based upon enthusiasm. And that enthusiasm is a gift coming from Krishna based on our ability to act as an instrument. One time I was asked to go to an airport and it was in San Antonio. The BBT asked me to go there and see if I could distribute books there. It wasn't legal, but they wanted to find out whether the airport was worthwhile to open, how it was. So it was illegal, so I went in there, of course, not dressed as a devotee, but I was so intent on distributing a book. I remember I actually was feeling so empowered by Krishna, I was just going up to people and handing them the book, and people were taking out their wallets and giving me a donation. I mean, I never felt such intense, transcendental energy. Except another time I was distributing books during a marathon, and I was giving out 2 Srimad Bhagavatams at a time. And I was trying to average 150 Bhagavatams a day. And after a while, it was a whole month, and I was so tired at the end of the month I couldn't say anything. I just walk up to people and hand them the 2 books, and they take out their wallet and give me a donation. And I go up to the next person. Because after a while, you can see, especially in book distribution, if you do it regularly, then after a while you develop a certain amount of momentum from the last day, a certain amount of transcendental potency is left over from the next day. You didn't have to try to kind of get back into it, you could say. In any case, that kind of enthusiasm has to be developed in the course of time, so that eventually it turns into we actually are able to see everyone connected to Krishna all the time. It's like putting an iron into the fire, it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and then eventually it acts just like fire, so wherever you touch the iron, it will act like fire. And of course, upeksha, try to become detached from unwanted association. That also is not the easiest thing in the world. Kali Yuga means unwanted association. You don't have to go and look for unwanted association. Unwanted association is coming door to door looking for you. Practically, Kali Yuga means everywhere there's unwanted association. When I first went to Poland, which was in 1990, I was quite surprised because there was no advertisements anywhere for anything. And on the road there were hardly any cars. There were horses and buggies more than there were cars. And it was such a nice atmosphere. People had so little to do in terms of external engagement that you put up a poster and 50 to 100 people would come in a day to a program. And Indra Maharaj was doing programs, they'd do a little more advertisement, and he'd get 500 people very easily at every program, just by a little advertisement. But now, if you go to Poland, the whole street everywhere is covered by signs. Buy this, eat that, drink this, smoke this, the whole thing. And now if you advertise for 2 weeks, you might get 50 people in some engagements. Because people are so distracted, there's so many things to disturb their minds, that the idea of trying to concentrate on some spiritual subject matter seems to them, a waste of time. So Kali Yuga means that. So how to avoid the internet, getting absorbed in the news, what's happening, what the stock market. We may not even have money in the stock market. We may worry about what's going on in the stock market, although it has nothing to do with us. Which country is being bombed today? What's the price of gold? Whether or not, the banks have failed. Whatever. So much to worry about, not only in your own city, but everywhere. The whole methodologies put people in fear. Some comet I heard was supposed to come and kill everyone in 2012. So, the whole idea is to put people constantly in fear all the time. So, as the government and the banks pick your pocket, that you don't worry about it because, I'm going to die soon anyhow. Why should I worry about these things? In any case, people are generally distracted. Therefore, if we don't avoid these unwanted associations, then it's very hard to fix our mind in Krishna consciousness. So the ability to avoid unwanted association, to preach to the innocent, and to properly reciprocate with the devotees according to their level of advancement, and to learn to love Krishna. So Krishna is the center of all our engagements, whatever we're doing. So this is the art of devotional service. This is the art by which we gradually come, that Krishna becomes so much the center that we see Krishna everywhere. That he overwhelms we see all the devotees and we reciprocate with them as their servant. We see the innocent and we see them, and even the envious, we see that everyone is Krishna's servant. Not to be imitated, but should be the goal that we're trying to achieve, to come up to that platform. That our love expands so much, nothing will restrict it. We see everything so much in relation to Krishna that we fall in love with everyone and everything. So continuing on with here, I'm just going to skip a little bit here, so no, we won't. One who is interested in chanting the holy name of Krishna, or by practice likes to chant Krishna's name, should be accepted as a Vaishnava and offered respects as such, at least within one's mind. One of our friends, a famous English musician, has become attracted to chanting the holy names of Krishna. And even in his records, he has several times mentioned the holy name of Krishna. At his home, he offers respect to pictures of Krishna and also to the preachers of Krishna consciousness. In all respects, he has a very high estimation for Krishna's name and Krishna's activities. Therefore, we offer respects to him without reservation. We're actually seeing that this gentleman is advancing gradually in Krishna consciousness. Such a person should always be shown respect. The conclusion is that anyone who is trying to advance in Krishna consciousness by regularly chanting the holy name should always be respected by Vaishnavas. On the other hand, we have witnessed that some of our contemporaries, who are supposed to be great preachers, have gradually fallen into the material conception of life because they have failed to chant the holy name of the Lord. So chanting the holy name of the Lord, as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has said, is not simply to put together some letters of the alphabet. Chanting the holy name of the Lord means that we have to have the correct understanding of what we're doing. That Krishna, the name of Krishna, as it says, is not different from Krishna, but who is Krishna? That we, as Krishna said, Yad Yad Vibhudimat Sattvam Srimad Orjitam Evava Tat Tad Eva Lagachetvam Taivang Samsa Sambhavam. That know that all beautiful and mighty creations spring from but a spark of my splendor. So we look around us and we see so many personalities, so much different type of knowledge, so much different type of beauty, so much different types of wealth, so many different colors and shapes and forms. That's our little position in the material world, what we can perceive, or that's the little bit we can perceive within our very limited realm of experience. But Krishna, if you multiply that millions and billions of times, that would even give us a little fraction of the indication of who Krishna really is. One time, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he was a temple commander in California, in our temple in Los Angeles, and Srila Prabhupada was explaining to him that in the spiritual world there's a planet called Goloka Vrindavan, and it's so big that if you put all the Vaikuntha planets into this one planet called Goloka Vrindavan, then all the Vaikuntha planets would fit into that one lotus flower. Now the Vaikuntha planets themselves, there are unlimited numbers of them, and each Vaikuntha planet is bigger than all the material universes combined. But anyhow, in one little small part of the spiritual world, there sometimes forms a little cloud, hardly noticeable. And in that little cloud, Mahavishnu lies down, and from his breathing emanates unlimited universes, material universes, from the pores of his body. And they are all floating on the causal ocean. And in the smallest of those unlimited universes, more universes than there are the number of grains of sand on the beach. And the smallest of them, and on all of them indeed, Garbhodaka Vishnu lies down, and from his navel one Brahma is born with 4 heads. And Brahma, in that lotus flower which he comes from, he creates unlimited numbers of planets, just like the numbers of dust that float in the sky. And in one of those little pieces of dust, it's called the planet Earth. And on this planet Earth, there are so many different continents. One of them is called North America. And in North America, there are so many different states. One of them is called California. And in California, there's one little city called Los Angeles. And Los Angeles is one little boulevard called the Seneca Boulevard. And there's so many houses. In one little house, there's one temple commander, and he thinks he's controlling everything. So, to try to conceive of what reality is, what Krishna's opulence is, and everything's coming from Krishna, and to try to conceive what his opulences are, is impossible. We cannot possibly, as Lord Brahma tells Krishna during his prayers, this atomic scientist may one day be able to count the entire number of atoms there are in the universe. But still, I do not think that they can possibly understand the innumerable qualities that you have within yourself. Others may say they understand you, but as for myself, I don't think I've understood even a fraction of who you are. It's completely beyond my ability. All we can do is try to hear about Krishna, try to appreciate how great Krishna is, and then try to chant the holy name with some reverence and some attention. Then gradually by doing that in the proper mood, in the proper feeling, well, we should say with the proper mood, because the mood should be of submission. If we want to become, if we're receptive to the holy name, if we're in the mood of submission, then we'll be able to feel Krishna's presence. If we are doubtful, if we're in a different material consciousness, if we're anxiety, what's going to happen to me tomorrow, what's going to happen to me later on, if we're disturbed because of something that happened to us, we're angry with someone, or we're greedy for something, then it's very hard to be receptive. So we have to be peaceful, that's called the mode of goodness, and we have to be receptive. Not that it's impossible, how can Krishna's name be the same as himself? No, Krishna can be the same as himself, and we can perceive him if we have the proper consciousness. Just like everywhere, and even in this room, there are radio waves, and television waves, and probably many other ways. But unless we have a television set, unless we have a radio, we will not be able to perceive all the waves that are going on around us. Similarly, within our heart, there is a transcendental television. But unless the transcendental television is working, we will not be able to perceive Krishna's activities on channel Krishna. Therefore, we have to repair the television so we become receptive to the channel Krishna, and we're able to perceive his name, his form, his qualities, and his pastimes, which is very subtle. It's subtler than the gross body, it's subtler than our subtle mind, our subtle intelligence, even subtler than our false ego is on the spiritual platform. Therefore, we have to make ourselves receptive, and then gradually we'll be able to perceive, at first, inconsistently, and then gradually more consistently, and then more intensively, and then finally perfectly, Krishna's name, form, quality, and pastimes. But in any case, we have to offer respect to those who are undergoing the process. Otherwise, if we can't respect those who are engaged in the process, how will we be encouraged to follow the process ourselves? When people go to a football game, or whatever, I guess here they play football. People play football here?
Yes.
People are enthusiastic during their football games?
Yes.
Has anyone here ever been to a football game? Has anyone ever been to a sports game? Devotees here are very pure. But if you walk by an arena, a stadium where they're having a sports game, and we say Jai, but when you listen to the people roar with enthusiasm for their winning team, or cry with remorse over their loss, then you can see what, in the material world, what unalloyed enthusiasm means. People take their sports so seriously that sometimes they have riots and people are killed if their team loses. Or in South America, in Central America, twice it happened that there was a war declared because of their team loss. And actually armies fought each other because of the football game. I mean, that's serious. So to come to that state of enthusiasm, we should be equally as enthusiastic for Krishna as the materialists are enthusiastic over their sports games. In any case, we make ourselves receptive, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his 6 Goswamis, the Panchatattva, they're meant to show us how to make ourselves receptive. And the most receptivity is the feeling of separation. Just like before the feast, especially if it's going to be a very nice feast, then people feel great separation from the prasadam. Isn't that right? The whole mind is fixed on when every moment goes by like 12 years. finally they ring the bell and your heart starts jumping up in ecstasy. And if you're online, you're just counting the number of people ahead of you. So this is, feeling separation. Then finally, when you get the prasadam, how much there is appreciation for the prasadam, feeling that separation. Similarly, the more we feel separation from Krishna and from his associates, then the more we actually associate with Krishna. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates teach us how to feel separation from Krishna. The gopis during the day, they are always feeling separation from Krishna, but during that time they are actually more intimately associating with Krishna through strong feelings of separation. Therefore, within their hearts, they are always perceiving Krishna's pastimes because of those feelings of separation. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna saw that, because after all, he was in their hearts, and he was realizing that they're experiencing more happiness than I am. I'm performing my pastimes, and I feel happiness doing it, but I'm perceiving that these gopis were feeling separation from me during the day. They're experiencing more happiness by remembering my pastimes than I'm experiencing by performing the pastimes. So maybe I should try to become a gopi. I should become a servant of Krishna, and therefore I'll feel more happiness than I feel as being Krishna. So in the material world, everyone's trying to become Krishna, and in the spiritual world, Krishna is trying to become a devotee of Krishna. So that's the difference between material and spiritual. In any case, therefore Krishna comes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to feel that separation from himself, how much happiness there is. And we can feel that same separation from Krishna by becoming Krishna conscious. The difficulty is, in the material world, it's just like a trap. In the material world, Maya is here, and even when we try to make a little advancement, Maya will try to allure us by so many different types of allurements. Yogas, chalati, manasa. As soon as we look around and we think, what's in the material world for me? What can I bring? What can I get here? As soon as we look around, we become afraid I'm going to lose something. Then at once Maya captures us and our remembrance of Krishna is forgotten. In other words, as soon as we think ourselves be an enjoyer, Ishvaraham aham bhogi, siraham balavan sukhi. Whereas Krishna summarizes the whole materialistic consciousness, idam adya maya labdva, imam prapse manoratam, idam astiya apime, bhavishati panardanam, aso maya hatakshatror, hanishe chaparanapi, Ishvaraham aham bhogi, Siraham Balavan Sukhi Adyo Bijanvanasmi Konyosi Sadrisho Maya Yakshe Dashami Modisha Ityaganam Vivohitaha. The demoniac, they think. Of course, demoniac doesn't mean a person who walks around with two little horns and a tail. That's how you can tell who's a demon. No, it's the demoniac consciousness. So much do I have today, and I'll gain more according to my schemes. So much money do I have, and I'll get more and more and more in the future. He is my enemy, and I've killed him, and my other enemies will also be killed. I am the Lord of everything. I am Ishvara Ham Aham Bhogi. I am the enjoyer. Ishvara Ham Aham Bhogi Siraham. I am perfect. Balavan, I am powerful. And Sukhi, I am happy. I am surrounded by rich and aristocratic relatives. Adyo maya takshatro hanishan Adyo bijanavanasmi konyosi sadrishama. Yakshe, I will perform some sacrifice. Yakshe dashami, I will give some charity. In this way, I'll be elevated to the heavenly planets. And as Purnachandra Maharaj said in his tape, what was that called? Gitamrita. He said, I will kiss the apsaras there. In this way, one is bewildered by ignorance. So in the material world, we'll look around, we're programmed by our material consciousness, by our past activities, and we become bewildered looking around, thinking I can get this, or I should avoid that, or this is going to happen to me, and therefore we forget Krishna. So as soon as we forget Krishna, where are we? We're in Maya. And as soon as we remember Krishna, then we're getting out of Maya to some extent. Otherwise, we're always in Maya as soon as we forget Krishna. It's not a question, Prabhu, can you tell me I'm in Maya? Well, are you remembering Krishna? No, well, you're in Maya. Oh, Prabhu, but I am remembering Krishna. You're still in Maya. You're just a little less in Maya than you were previously. No, we'll be out of Maya when we see Krishna face to face. Then there is no more Maya. Of course, if we just come to a platform like asakti. Does anyone know what the symptoms of asakti are?
Very attracted to hear about Krishna.
Yes, very attractive. So attractive that as soon as the mind forgets Krishna, even for a moment, immediately it reverts back to remembering Krishna again. I mean, that's quite a desirable state, but that's not, if you multiply that millions of times, then you come to the platform of bhava, where actually one is feeling, as it says here, one is actually feeling for Krishna. Now we say Krishna, sometimes you can remember Krishna, we feel the atmosphere becomes nicer, devotees become more enthusiastic, but when the actual feelings we have are awakened for Krishna, just like one devotee says, as a young boy, when he sees a young girl, he naturally feels attracted. Or a young girl sees a nice young boy, they naturally feel attracted. So when will my feelings awaken to you in the same way? Every living entity naturally has an attraction that way for Krishna. It's not an intellectual attraction, or even some kind of attraction like we have for, say, some sports hero or some movie star. But we have an overwhelming feeling attraction for Krishna. When Krishna would come back from the forest during the day, the animals would stop they would not go further than the boundary of Vrindavan township. And all during the night, they would be lying down or sitting there in great feeling of separation from Krishna. Just like the gopis during the day, they feel separation from Krishna with great feeling. So the animals in the forest would feel great separation from Krishna in exactly the same way. So that bhava, that feeling, is actually what we're trying to awaken. And if you multiply that bhava, that feeling, unlimitedly, because bhava is said to be one ray in the sunlight of prema, that's called prema. And prema is the beginning of actual life. Because prema, there are different stages of prema, of intensity, such as prema, sneha, mana, raga, anuraga, bhava, mahabhava. And Krishna's pastimes, for instance, with the gopis, are executed on what level? Does anyone know? Which of the different prema, levels of prema? Hello? Anyone out there? Mahabhava. Mahabhava and bhava. Generally, bhava and mahabhava. Generally, the gopis, there's two different stages of bhava. There's the mahabhava that Chandravali has and the mahabhava that Shrimati Radharani has. But they're both gopis, so both levels of mahabhava. Therefore, do we think that just by hearing Krishna's pastimes with the gopis, we're going to actually understand what's going on? No, it's not very likely we can understand very much what's going on. Matter of fact, we'll probably misunderstand what's going on, as if it's just some ordinary affair between some boy and girl. We can't understand the depth of the intensity of the emotions involved, of the pure loving feelings that are involved, which is actually what's actually going on. Not the external activity, is actually the loving exchanges that are going on. Therefore, asakti, and before there is ruchi. Ruchi, where at every moment one is taking pleasure in remembering Krishna. So as soon as one chants Hare Krishna, one can feel, smell, taste, actually touch Krishna's name, form, quality, pastimes, and his associates. One gets a taste for everything about Krishna consciousness. The whole world becomes tasty and enjoyable because one sees everything and everyone in relation to Krishna. So everything gives one transcendental pleasure. And that's the lower stage in asakti, which is insignificant compared to bhava, which is just one ray in the sunlight of prema. Can we understand this? No, I can't understand anything what's about. But at least we should have some reverence towards this. That when we chant Hare Krishna and Krishna is actually present, we may not perceive him very intently or very clearly, but we should have some reverence to the holy name. How fortunate we are that just by chanting Hare Krishna, then Krishna and Srimati Radharani are there. And if we can improve our chanting and perceive them more clearly with our spiritual senses, then gradually our real life will begin again. This external life we're living now is not really our life. Of course, because we're performing devotional service, it's becoming life again. But without devotional service, there is no life. They're just dead bodies walking around, living in a dream, in a nightmare actually. A nightmare of old age, disease, and death, and then taking another costume again to go through the whole thing again. It's a horror show, but some people like horror shows. I don't particularly like a horror show, but if you want to stay here for the next nightmare, the next horror movie, then good luck. In any case, this is the process of waking up to the holy name of Krishna, specifically. And if it's chanted with reverence and affection, following the footsteps of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Panchatattva, following their Sankirtan movement, through the instructions of Sri Rupa Goswami and the other Goswamis, which are given to us through our disciple succession and applied through our current representatives of that disciple succession, then the result is that gradually we'll become purified and receptive to the holy name, and one day we'll realize Krishna directly. Krishna will reveal himself to us. Any questions so far? Yes.
I have three questions.
Mike?
Na hrvatskom počinu. Maharaj je rekao da je majka, Vede su majka, to je ponavljao u nekim lekcijama. Također govore da treba slijediti Vede. Međutim, većina Veda nije personalna.
You have said that Vedas are our mother and that we should follow Vedas in previous lectures, but actually most of the Vedic texts are not personal.
Jako mali dio Veda je personalno.
Only a little fraction of Vedas.
No, all the Vedas are all personal. We have the personified Vedas, and they speak the 89th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. All the Vedas are personal, but they're interpreted in an impersonal way by people who are impersonal. Vedaisha savara hameva vedyo, Vedanta krid vedavid eva chaham. All the Vedas emanate from Krishna, who's a person. So how can they be impersonal? And Krishna says, by all the Vedas I am to be known. Therefore, the aim of all the Vedas is to introduce Krishna. Of course, Krishna is Brahman, Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti, Shakdite. So sometimes Krishna is introduced from his effulgence, sometimes by his localized expansion, sometimes by himself directly in his feature as Bhagavan. But in any case, the Vedas are to lead us to Krishna himself personally.
A većina se interpretira u Indiji
But in India they are mostly interpreted in an impersonal way.
Everything, we're in the age of Kali Yuga, everyone is crazy. What do we expect? We're in a house, we're in a place where everyone's crazy. People are all in ignorance, they're covered by Kali Yuga.
I have one more question, which is probably even more crazy.
Koliko sam razumio, postoje dvije opcije. Ili smo Krišna, ili smo sluga Krišne.
As far as I have understood, there are only two alternatives. Either we are Krishna or we are Krishna's servant.
Either we're Krishna,
or Krishna's servant.
Either we're Krishna.
U iluziji.
Krishna's servant.
Krishna while we are in illusion.
Yes,
Think
we're,
we are Krishna.
yes, that's
And
right.
then the other option is we are actually Krishna's servant.
Znači, samo te dvije opcije imamo.
Therefore, there are only these two options.
Yes, there are only two options.
Dok ne realiziram prirodu svoju, zašto nije okej da budem Krišna?
As long as I do not realize my nature, why is it is not okay to be Krishna? What is wrong with being Krishna?
Being Krishna.
Svi glubimo Krišnu.
We are all acting as we are Krishna.
What's wrong with it? Well, you have to figure out what's wrong with it. There's a few minor problems, like you have to be in a body, a material body. Have you noticed there's a couple of problems, one or two problems with having a material body? No, that's the problem. If you have a material body, there's going to be a few problems with it. And if you have a spiritual body, there's no old age, disease, and death, for instance. Therefore, there's less problems. In fact, for a spiritual body, there is no problem. So our only problem is we've forgotten Krishna. But that's a big problem. Yes? The other thing is also as it says in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, text number 34, could be 35, I can't remember right now. I think it's 35. You have 2:35 there? You have 2:34?
37.
No, that's actually... There it says that the super soul is in everyone's heart, and he can be understood by finding the symptoms and by use of one's intelligence. So there Prabhupada writes in the purport. Actually, we have this wonderful database here. Don't have to speculate so much. 35. By taking advantage of the guidance at this point in our investigation, we may consider the following question. On one hand, we realize that all our perceptions and activities are conditioned by arrangements of material nature. And yet we also ordinarily feel and say, I am perceiving or I am doing. Therefore, we can say that our material senses of perception and action are moving because we are identifying the self with the material body, and that the superior principle of super self is guiding and supplying us according to our desire. So we're desiring, Krishna is reciprocating with us. By taking advantage of the guidance of super self in the form of intelligence, we can either continue to study and put into practice our conclusion that I am not this body, or we can choose to remain in the false material identification, fancying ourselves to be the possessors and the doers. Our freedom consists in orientating our desire either towards the ignorant material misconception or the true spiritual conception. So that's our freedom, which way we want to orientate our desires. Now, without the intelligence supplied by the super soul, of at least basically understanding I'm not this body, I'm actually Krishna's servant, and therefore even if some desire comes to our mind for material sense gratification, we don't really take it very significantly because we realize it. What does it have to do with my real self, my real goal in life? And therefore it comes and it goes. On the other hand, one who identifies himself with the body, some desire comes, and obviously they may take it very seriously and try to execute it, either immediately or in the distant future, or in the future. Therefore, with proper knowledge, we can orientate our desires properly. And without that knowledge, then we can't orientate our desires. And therefore, when we orientate our desires properly, then Krishna makes spiritual arrangements for us. And when we orientate our desires improperly, then Krishna makes material arrangements for us. If it's time to come to the arti, and I think, well, maybe I should go and see what's on the news. Then I'm orientating my desires in a certain since my desire is being orientated in a certain way, I'll go and watch the news and miss the arti. Now the news, if it's the devotees are doing Harinama, it's on the news, it may be a little spiritual, but it's not very likely. Yes?
There is, when man receives Diksha, he is mathematician, and third there is discussion between the if devotee is served deeply and don't know how to reciprocate with devotee, he is punished. It's like, from one side it's like external vision.
Yeah.
First initiation, second madhyamati.
It's not, I think we have to assimilate everything. Prabhupada doesn't say just initiation, he says and seriously engage in service to the spiritual master. Not just initiation in itself, Prabhupada never says will produce anything. Initiation, just like Krishna never says, you approach the spiritual master, inquire from him submissively. He doesn't say that's the end of it. You have to render service. Then there's realization. Unless there's service and inquiry, or unless there's service and submission, inquiry from the bona fide spiritual master will not be effective. But when the disciple is always inquisitive and ready to render service, then the reciprocation between knowledge and inquiries becomes perfect. So initiation is part of a process to becoming Krishna conscious. It's a process. In itself, doesn't mean anything unless you're following the process.
Somebody come in, he see what is second initiation devotee, I should behave with him like this. I don't know. For instance, he second initiation, but he don't know how to reciprocate with devotee.
Well, don't worry about it. We try to follow the etiquette. We should do some discrimination, but generally speaking, we try to give appreciation, honor to other devotees. That will help us advance in devotional service. Of course, it should be real. But just as a general instruction, there's the story of the prostitute and the Brahmin. The prostitute was a devotee, but somehow or another, by ill fortune, she had become a prostitute. But she felt herself very fallen and always thinking about the Brahmin who lived across the street from her, how great a devotee he was, and therefore she was always thinking about him, if only one day she could also always remember Krishna and chant the holy name like he was doing. That way she was always remembering the Brahmin, and by doing that, always remembering Krishna. So she was constantly absorbed in Krishna consciousness. On the other hand, the Brahmin was a little envious of the prostitute, thinking how much money she was getting from her occupation, and therefore every time she had a client, he'd mark on his wall, just see another one, oh, she's going to hell. So all day long he was marking on his wall the number of clients, thinking enviously of the prostitute, how she was acquiring all this money and how she was going to go to hell because of it. So at the end of the lifetime of the prostitute, she was thinking in rapt attention of the Brahmin how he was chanting Hare Krishna, and she went back to the spiritual world. And the Brahmin was thinking of the prostitute enviously how she was acquiring so much money, and he went to hell. Therefore, we should try to be liberal to others and try to be very strict with ourselves. Of course, if it's obvious that some devotee is not very strictly following the principles, here it says we have to assimilate the knowledge and at least respect them within our mind, because they are chanting Hare Krishna. Although not associate with them very intimately, because by their association we may become influenced by it. But we're trying to learn how to show proper respect to all living entities. Even the spiritual master and advanced devotee, sometimes he chastises someone or criticizes them, but it's usually out of concern for their well-being. Prabhupada sometimes very strongly chastise someone, one of his disciples, or even his godbrothers sometimes, but it was more out of concern for their well-being than out of envy, just for the sake of chastising them. So we have to develop that concern, that vision, and from that point of vision, perform our activities from the transcendental platform of vision. See everyone as Krishna's eternal servant, not even if they do something wrong, and even we try to correct them, but try to appreciate that they're still Krishna's eternal servant, and on that spiritual platform, I'm everyone's servant. So even I try to correct them, I'm doing it as their servant, not as their superior. So even when we see some devotees fallen, then we should try to see if I can help them. If I can't help them, then I avoid them because I don't want to involve them more in sinful activities, or nor should I involve myself because I'm Krishna's servant. I should do what he wants me to do. Is that clear? So we have to see things from the spiritual platform, and if we're not on that spiritual platform, at least from the second-class platform, where we try to help people who are innocent by preaching to them as best we can, avoid those who are envious of Krishna, try to properly reciprocate with the devotees, loving exchanges, and try to love Krishna. Try to recognize that he is the owner of everything I have, and everything I have should be meant for his enjoyment. And that he's the real friend, he's my real friend, and he's the real friend of all living entities. Yes?
I had heard, I'm not asking if it's correct, that in order to make advancement in spiritual life we have to act on the second level, and now you see from the spiritual.
Well, if we're neophyte devotees, obviously we have to advance. That's where we're trying to advance to, the second level.
Yeah, because if we would try to act on that spiritual platform, we would degrade ourselves.
No, we try, part of that vision, if we accept that everyone is actually Krishna's servant, we're not going to degrade ourselves. But we have to discriminate how to reciprocate appropriately with different devotees. So that's part of the second-class platform. Yes?
I was just wondering, could you say more about this word reciprocate? Is it the same as associate? Why do you use this word reciprocation? With
Because reciprocation means we deal appropriately with people. Just like with a devotee, we may offer them prasadam. We may go up to them and give them a plate of prasadam. Because they're a devotee of Krishna, therefore they can appreciate that. But if we go to the zoo, we see a tiger, we can think, well, in the heart of the tiger, there is a soul who's just like me, and therefore maybe I should go into the cage and offer my obeisances to the tiger. So that would not be a proper reciprocation. The tiger roars and I offer my head. He's asking for prasad, and I eat prasadam for so many years. Therefore let me offer him prasad in the form of mint, because he's a meat eater. No. So due to their strong feelings of separation, their consciousness increased the prema, so that they're able to become qualified in the future to join in the rasa dance. We don't find other persons, devotees, on a lower level of consciousness, still trying to chant 16 rounds in Krishna's pastimes. We find very elevated devotees. Therefore, if we do chant 16 rounds a day without offense, because Prabhupada also includes that in most of his explanations, without offense, for the rest of our lives, hopefully we have a long life, then we may easily come to the platform of a Sakti or a Ruchi or some higher level, or even Bhava or Prema. We may come to that platform if we offenselessly chant the holy name. Now, if one is discouraged by that, thinking, oh, it's going to take so long, well, that if you're encouraged by material existence, well, I can go back to my girlfriend and take intoxication and go to hell in one life. If that's encouraging, well, what can we say?
Maharaj, so is it then that Prabhupada was just giving some rhetorical exaggerations in order to motivate devotees, or was he really merciful to make?
He is merciful, but what is his mercy? His mercy is the instructions he's giving. Krishna, as Prabhupada writes, it's very clear, Krishna is equal to everyone. As Prabhupada writes in the chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita, that, I'll read it. The mercy of the spiritual master is not just I give you mercy and you go back to the spiritual world. Otherwise, if he's so kind, why doesn't everyone just go back immediately to the spiritual world? He like that. The spiritual master is merciful to everyone. Why just people who chant 16 rounds? Shnik, shnik, ram, ram, day, 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 day. Hey, kitty, kitty, hey, kitty, kitty. If they chant such rounds 16 rounds a day, why do they go back to Godhead? And someone else is just, why does the cats go back to Godhead too? They're also chanting kitty, 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 hey, kitty, kitty, hey, kitty, kitty. Someone who owns a cat. Why don't they go back to Godhead too? No, the point is that we have a Bhagavad Gita?
You need English?
Yeah, English.
German.
I can just see from here. Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 3. Text number. Chapter 5, text number 29. A pure soul is the eternal servant of God as his fragmental part and parcel. He comes into contact with Maya illusion due to the desire to lord over Maya, and that is the cause of his many sufferings. As long as he is in contact with matter, he has to execute work in terms of material necessities. Krishna consciousness, however, brings one into spiritual life even while one is within the jurisdiction of matter. For it is an arousing of spiritual existence by practice in the material world. The more one is advanced, the more he is freed from the clutches of matter. The Lord is not partial toward anyone. Everything depends on one's practical performance of duties in Krishna consciousness, which help one control the senses in every respect and conquer the influence of desire and anger. And one who stands fast in Krishna consciousness, controlling the above-mentioned passions, remains facturing the transcendental stage, or Brahma Nirvana. So it says the Lord is not partial toward anyone. Everything depends upon one's practical performance of duties in Krishna consciousness. So we just read, Prabhupada said, many of my godbrothers, who are supposedly very advanced in Krishna consciousness, they haven't actually been, they failed to chant. On the other hand, we have witnessed that some of our contemporaries who are supposed to be great preachers have gradually fallen into the material conception of life because they have failed to chant the holy name of the Lord. They were chanting, but they don't really chant Hare Krishna. Yes, chant 16 rounds, but chant Hare Krishna during the 16 rounds. Then one will become elevated in Krishna consciousness. But we have to learn how to chant the holy name. That means without offense. That's probably right in most places. Chant 16 rounds without offense and do some preaching work, and gradually you'll become advanced in Krishna consciousness. Now, if you think Prabhupada was trying to trick someone by saying that, maybe he was. If that's what it takes for people to chant Hare Krishna, then better that you try to trick them like that. But I don't think Prabhupada was trying to trick them. It's not that Prabhupada made one statement somewhere and a completely different statement in another place, and therefore he's contradicting himself. We have to assimilate the knowledge, and then we'll understand things clearly. But if we take some sentimental understanding, well, Prabhupada said, I just have to chant 16 rounds and try and follow the 4 of the principles, and then I'm guaranteed at the end of this lifetime to go back to the spiritual world, then, but in other places he says something different, then I have to assimilate the knowledge and try to get a clear understanding of what it really means. Sri Rupa Goswami says devotional service is generally a continuum over many lifetimes. And sometimes someone doesn't have previous contact with devotional service, but by good association he takes up the process. And it's a process. Rarely, Prabhupada says, anyone gets you go to the university, you get your PhD degree. It's very rare anyone stays at home and by some good coincidence, they give them an honorary PhD degree. No, you have to go to the university and study and practice, and when you're qualified, they give you your degree. So Prabhupada said, first deserve and then desire. So we have to become qualified. Otherwise, why did Prabhupada give so many lectures? Why did he write so many books? If all he had to do is tell everyone to chant 16 rounds and follow the 4 of the principles, why didn't he just emphasize that? Why did he have to give all this information, all this transcendental knowledge? But if you're satisfied with Prabhupada's, that particular instruction, you have full faith in it, and you do chant 16 rounds every day as best you can and follow 4 of the principles, then maybe Prabhupada will take you back to the spiritual world. He's unlimited. Maybe he will if you're that sincere. But if you think, well, I don't have to do anything, I'll just chant 16 rounds, follow the 4 of the principles, and for the rest of the day, I'll just play, checkers. But he's taking me back to the spiritual world anyhow. So that, I doubt whether it's going to happen like that. So I'm going to jump over here to the part which I thought was the most interesting. Now, we've heard different conceptions what Uttama Adhikari is, what Madhyama Adhikari and Kanisa Adhikari. So now Prabhupada will give us a very exacting understanding of Uttama Adhikari. This is the correct way of understanding Bhagavad Gita, and this is called Shraddha. So this is about the point that we just made also. It is not that one accepts one portion of Bhagavad Gita according to one's own whimsical interpretations and then rejects another portion. That is not Shraddha. Shraddha means accepting the instructions of Bhagavad Gita in their totality, especially the last instruction, Sarva Dharma Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. Bhagavad Gita 1866. When one becomes completely faithful in regard to this instruction, one's strong faith becomes the basis for advancing in spiritual life. When one fully engages in chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, he gradually realizes his own spiritual identity. Unless one faithfully chants the Hare Krishna mantra, Krishna does not reveal himself. Sevan mukhehi jivado swayam eva sparatyada. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-234. We cannot realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead by any artificial means. We must engage faithfully in the service of the Lord. Such service begins with the tongue. Sevan mukhehi jivado. which means that we should always chant the holy names of the Lord and accept Krishna Prasad. We should not chant or accept anything else. When this process is faithfully followed, the Supreme Lord reveals himself to the devotee. 16 rounds, but we have to chant constantly Hare Krishna, then Krishna faithfully. Then he reveals himself to the devotee. Now Prabhupada says, when a person realizes himself to be the eternal servant of Krishna, he loses interest in everything but Krishna's service. Always thinking of Krishna, devising means by which to spread the holy name of Krishna, he understands that his only business is spreading the Krishna consciousness movement all over the world. Such a person is to be recognized as an Uttama Adhikari, and his association should be immediately accepted according to the 6 processes, the Dati, Prati, Grinati, etc. Indeed, the advanced Uttama Adhikari Vaishnava should be accepted as a spiritual master. Everything one possesses should be offered to him, for it is enjoined that one should deliver whatever he has to the spiritual master. The brahmachari in particular is supposed to beg alms from others and offer them to the spiritual master. However, one should not imitate the behavior of an advanced devotee or Mahabhagava without being self-realized, for by such imitation one will eventually become degraded. So it is not easy to be a Mahabhagava. It is not something that's very cheap. It is a very exalted position where one actually realizes his spiritual identity. That's the minimum. And he's completely out of love for Krishna, trying to expand Krishna consciousness to everyone, all the time, 24 hours a day. If we think, well, I don't have that qualification, I haven't realized my spiritual identity, so, but should I still act as an advanced devotee? Prabhupada said, no, we shouldn't imitate an advanced devotee, otherwise we'll get into trouble. So, now Prabhupada, in a very significant verse, I mean, in my particular opinion, if we have some problems in ISKCON, it's generally due to this, that we don't know really what our level of advancement is, and sometimes we act according to the wrong level. We don't really have a clear, the devotees in our society, for instance, don't have a very clear understanding what Uttama Adhikari means, and because of that, they don't have sufficient appreciation for Srila Prabhupada, what an advanced, exalted devotee he was. And therefore, sometimes they think that others may be on an equal level as he is, whether his god brothers or other devotees within our present society, who don't show the same symptoms of an Uttama Adhikari that Prabhupada did, and therefore they misjudge and they think that Prabhupada was just an advanced devotee, and there's so many other advanced devotees just like him. But there was no one like Prabhupada within recent time, except for Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, and maybe some other contemporaries who were very advanced devotees. But to realize one's spiritual identity and to be constantly engaged 24 hours a day in trying to spread Krishna consciousness, always thinking of Krishna, the only business is spreading the Krishna consciousness all around the world. And this is a very advanced, exalted devotee. So in this verse, Srila Rupa Goswami advises the devotee to be intelligent enough to distinguish between the Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, and Uttama Adhikari. So anyone who tells you that it's not possible to figure out which devotee is on what level, and therefore we shouldn't even bother trying to do it, well, obviously they haven't read Srila Rupa Goswami's instructions on this particular matter. He advises us we should learn how to properly discriminate who's on what level and not be sentimental. Now, we'll probably be wrong, because we don't, if we're a neophyte devotee, our conception of who's on what level is going to be wrong. But at least it should be guided, or not wrong, I should say. It may not be 100% accurate. But at least we should be guided by these instructions, and therefore it's much more likely, instead of maybe it's only 90% or 80% accurate, rather than 0% accurate. If we're guided by these instructions, then we'll actually get a much more higher percent of accuracy than if we have no idea at all how to judge the devotees. And the devotee should also know his own position and not try to imitate a devotee situated on a higher platform. So we should have some general idea what my state of consciousness is and what the next level I'm trying to attain. Therefore, our acharyas have given us elaborate discussions on different types of consciousness. For instance, in Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in describing Anishtata Bhajana Kriya, has given us 6 different stages of unsteady devotional service, beginning with being puffed up with enthusiasm, and then sometimes being very enthusiastic, and sometimes being unenthusiastic, sometimes speculating excessively about whether to be renounced, to try to enjoy, sometimes Juda, Vishaya, war against sense gratification, sometimes trying to fix oneself on the principles of devotional service more rigidly, and then sometimes not trying to enjoy the small levels of accomplishment or the things that we get from our even a small amount of advancement in becoming steady in devotional service, the profit that we get, the adoration, the distinction that comes from such a relatively more advanced devotee. Of course, Prabhupada once said in 1977, in the absence of a big tree, then a castor bush looks very big. Castor bush is kind of looks like a little tree. But a real big tree is really big, and a castor bush is not very big. But when you don't have any trees around, you see a castor bush, then it looks relatively big. Therefore, even when it comes to a relatively more stable position in devotional service, and therefore it gets the appreciation of others, and even their service or whatever else, one should not become bewildered by it and think that because I'm getting the appreciation of others, therefore I become a greatly advanced devotee. It's just a state of Anishtata Bhajana Kriya. One has to become detached from such ideas also. That I'm a greatly advanced devotee, I deserve all this service, whatever else. One has to see oneself as simply an instrument for the previous acharyas. Now, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given some practical hints to the effect that an Uttamadhikari Vaishnava can be recognized by his ability to convert many fallen souls to Vaishnavism. Which means that the devotee has to be very rigid in his glorification of Krishna, his service to the previous acharyas, and his rigidly humility, his actual realization that I'm simply an instrument for the previous acharyas. Then he may be able to convince others or train others to become similar as he is. One should not become a spiritual master unless he has attained the platform of Uttamadhikari. So does that mean that everyone in our society who's become an initiating guru is a Uttamadhikari? Obviously not, because we've had many devotees who are initiating spiritual masters who fell down. You can't fall down from the Uttamadhikari platform. It's very unlikely one who's actually fixed on the Madhyamadhikari platform will fall down. There's every likelihood that a Kanistadhikari devotee will fall down. Therefore, if there was a fall down, one must be on the Kanistadhikari platform. Bharat Maharaj may have fallen down. For instance, he was on the Baba platform. But his fall down was momentarily remembering a deer. Not that he had not that he was having some gross fall down in the middle of the jungle. No, gradually his devotional service slackened, and therefore he remembered a deer. I mean, we probably have more problems than sometimes remembering a deer. So this is an extreme example of an extremely advanced devotee having what we would consider relatively a minor problem. You won't get on some website, Bharat Maharaj fell down, we caught him remembering a deer. People will not take that very seriously. We have much bigger problems. So, therefore, what does Prabhupada say? One should not become a spiritual master unless he has attained this platform of Uttamadhikari. A neophyte Vaishnava or a Vaishnava situated on the intermediate platform can also accept disciples, but such disciples must be on the same platform, and it should be understood that they cannot advance very well towards the ultimate goal of life under his insufficient guidance. So Prabhupada's not saying, just like the Ritvik's saying, that, oh, only if you're an Uttamadhikari devotee can you be a spiritual master. No, Prabhupada's saying an intermediate or even a neophyte devotee can also accept disciples, but such disciples must be on the same platform, and it should be understood that they cannot advance very well due to his insufficient guidance. Whereas Prabhupada says in another place that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was on a, just to paraphrase it, he was a very exalted devotee. Such exalted devotees, their vision is just like Srimati Radharani, that I'm actually not the master of anyone, I'm the servant of everyone, that everyone is a greater servant of Krishna than I am. Such advanced devotees, they see everyone as an advanced devotee, except for themselves. But there are others, and such devotees, they're the ones who are actually qualified to become spiritual masters. Because they can't fall down. Even if they become a spiritual master, even if they get adoration or profit or distinction, whatever comes with the position, it doesn't affect them. Because they're always in the vision that everyone's a great devotee except for me. And nothing belongs to me, everything is Krishna's property. I'm simply the most insignificant servant of Krishna. Therefore, they're eligible to become, they're actually spiritual masters. But then Prabhupada says there are others who are less qualified. They can also become spiritual masters if they strictly follow the predecessor acharyas. Or as Prabhupada writes, or was spoken in a conversation in 1977 with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, discussing something similar to this about the problems with the Gaudiya Math that they had, and still were having at the time of Prabhupada's talking about it. He said because they failed to follow the instructions of their spiritual master. He said, yes, I want all my disciples to become acharyas, initiating acharyas. But a little qualification should be there, strictly following. Little qualification. For Prabhupada, it was a little qualification, but it's not such a little qualification, perhaps for us. Strictly following. Simple process, but not so simple to execute. So, such a devotee, still Prabhupada says that it should be understood that their followers can advance very well due to his insufficient guidance. Does that mean that the spiritual master or the advanced devotees in our society, they're not preaching, they're not giving guidance? No, it doesn't mean that. It means that the Uttamadhikari devotee, he knows perfectly well at every moment exactly what Krishna's desire is. But a less advanced devotee will not know at every moment exactly what Krishna's guidance is. Therefore, there has to be some appreciation for that level of service